This video outlines chapter 1 of Case for Easter by Lee Strobel. This chapter is looking at the medical evidence that would indicate that Jesus Christ did die. There are a good number of people which would argue that Jesus' death is a sham, that the resurrection is a hoax, and for the resurrection to be a hoax, or for Christ to have not actually died, we would need to know that somehow he was able to make it off the cross alive. And so we're looking at what medical evidence we have, what actually would happen to a person through the process of being flogged, nailed to a cross, hung on a cross. Could a person be able to escape such a fate? I've actually met some people and had conversations with people that would indicate that it would be more likely for him to have survived the cross than for him to have died and then to have a resurrection. They would stake their money on that over the fact that Christ actually died and rose from the grave. A person actually even was arguing with me once saying, there has to have been someone in history which has made it off the cross. There has to have been a good number of people. I mean, for instance, people have survived the electric chair. And I'm sitting going, wow. Okay. I get it. The reason you're maybe even contemplating someone could survive the cross is because what has the cross become for us today? It's become a piece of art. It's become a fashion statement. This is an example here. Oh, look how cute it is. This door creates a cross with its shadow. I mean, we got people now wearing crosses studded with diamonds. Golden crosses hanging from their necks, and sometimes these people aren't even Christian. And if they are Christian, sometimes they even look at it and I think, like, really? Wow, I mean, that's something that Christ hung upon, and now it's this beautiful piece of art. So, talking with the necklace thing, could you imagine if someone hung a syringe from their necklace and put a bunch of diamonds on it and was like, hey, this is my bling? You're like, that's a lethal injection syringe. That's cool. Could you imagine someone hanging an electric chair across their neck? We would probably see that person and think they're demented and sick. They'd be labeled gothic. All that just means the cross has probably lost its punch. This stuff hasn't. These are forms of executing people. So is this. And I think we don't really grasp what went on when someone was crucified. So let's dig into the readings of this a little bit. Lee Strobel does a good job pulling out, some of the ways this argument is presented in details today, mentioning that the Quran actually says that Christ wasn't killed on the cross, that he wasn't crucified. That can be found in Surah 4, 156 to 157. Lee doesn't actually quote that in the text, so I would recommend spending some time to look that up and to look into how Muslims would actually present this idea that someone could have been on the cross that was thought to have been Jesus, when in fact Jesus was not on the cross. How would that exchange have taken place? How would they explain that? Check it out. What's the reasoning for the burial tomb in Srinagar, Kashmir? So Lee mentions that in Kashmir there actually is a town that claims to have this tomb which Jesus of Nazareth was actually buried in. Look it up online. There's a good bit on there. There's even like the tourist pages for it. You can find images of it. Just to connect this to, we're living here in America, but that doesn't mean we can't be transported instantly via the internet and to get more, evidence of this stuff. Karl Barth and Carl Venturini, they supported the swoon theory in this fictional tale that they wrote. It's all there in chapter 1 of Case for Easter. He doesn't say exactly how they supported the swoon theory, so why don't you look online and figure out how these two supported the swoon theory. Look up some of the popular literature books listed in the chapter and find out more about them. So what Lee Strobel does is he mentions numerous books that are fictionalized, and they're more like, what if this happened, right? What if he survived the cross? So how do they suggest that he survived the cross? Just look it up. Go on Amazon, look up the names of those books, look up their authors, see what else these people wrote, see what type of reviews these books are getting. Are they well accepted? Are they well received? It could be pretty fun stuff. So just to dig deeper into the readings, it's something that I really think we all should do when we read text. If they don't actually quote the source that they're referencing, in our day and age, we can use the internet and go online and actually find the quote itself. All right, so just going into the medical evidence, one of the first questions we should ask is sweating blood medically possible? When Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, it's recorded that he was sweating blood. And so, just is that medically possible? If it's not medically possible, maybe this could be one indication that we should take some doubt on everything else that occurs in the Gospels concerning Christ's crucifixion. So this is actually possible. It's called hematidrosis. It comes about from a high degree of psychological stress and severe anxiety. The resultant chemicals from that break down the capillaries in the sweat glands, and sweat comes out tinged in blood. Okay, Roman flogging. We know that Jesus was flogged. I believe Pilate's hope and intention there was that seeing Christ flogged, the Jews would see, dang, he's taken a bad enough beating. We don't need to crucify this guy. I'm sure he's not going to, keep teaching and saying the things that he's doing after receiving this beating. This was really intense stuff. They weren't your typical whips. There would be shards of bone twined into the whips, steel balls. And that the bone would actually dig into the flesh, and as it pulls out, it tears the flesh. The steel balls would beat and bruise the flesh and make it more tender, so it would tear more. The result of a Roman flogging would put a person in hypovolemic shock. Hypo meaning low, vol volume, emic blood, so a low blood volume would result, which could lead to fainting. Blood pressure would drop. Kidneys would stop producing urine. It would produce extreme thirst. And many people would die just from the flogging. And we see elements of the result of this within the text. Christ is unable to carry his cross all the way to Golgotha and needs help. He is extremely thirsty on the cross. Something about crucifixion. This is, to me, one of the most ouch moments of it. Crucifixion, nails would go through the wrist. This was so it would support the weight of his body. All right, and so oftentimes we see pictures through the hands. If it was on the hands, the weight of the nail would just tear through the hand, and the criminal would not be able to stay on the cross. So they would put the nail through the wrist. Putting the nail through the wrist here, the median nerve would be crushed. And this is similar to the pain of hitting the ulnar nerve, which is the funny bone, except, of course, this would be a constant feeling of like that funny bone being hit. I can't even imagine what that would be like. The word excruciating comes from this type of pain. All right? So that in translation, it actually means out of the cross. So the word excruciating comes out of the cross. It's how we have to explain the type of pain that the Romans were creating through crucifixion. The cause of death is actually asphyxiation. So this means to cause or die or lose consciousness by impairing normal breathing, as by gas or noxious agents, choke, suffocate, smother. So a person on the cross would actually die by suffocation. And the idea is that with the hanging, the weight of the body, the weight is so much that your lungs can't expand to breathe. And so in order to breathe, what the criminals would do, they would push up with their push up on the nails with their feet, that the nails driven through their ankles. They would push up with their feet to get up high enough so where the weight was off them so they could breathe. And then they would drop back down. And so it was this constant up and down so they could breathe, which would then just wear and tear on your back even more. as your back was already flogged. So just your back would be scraping against the back of the beam of the cross. Very, very painful. And this would go on for hours. And Jesus, of course, gave up his life. So I would say he quit fighting and just gave in to the suffocation. But people would fight back and forth, and this is where they would go through and then break the legs just to speed up the crucifixion so that they couldn't keep going up and down to be able to breathe. Really intense stuff. The hypovolemic shock would have caused a rapid heart rate, leading to heart failure, resulting in the collection of fluid in the membrane around the heart, as well as around the lungs. This explains why, when the centurion thrust his spear into Jesus' side, blood and water both came out. And to leave with this question, what would possibly have motivated Jesus to willingly allow himself to be degraded and brutalized the way that he was? And then also, I think covering this, you should see there's no chance that he got off the cross.